Well, another episode has been cleared for public release. Just barely, but I'll take it. Today, our topic is the Revolutionary FAR Overhaul, which is exactly the kind of phrase only government contracting could possibly create. Revolutionary FAR Overhaul. 3 words that somehow sound like reform, confusion, and a migraine all arriving in the same calendar invite. And listen, if the FAR is getting overhauled, contractors don't get to sit back and admire the renovation like tourists at a regulatory home improvement show. Because when FAR parts get rewritten, guidance shifts, deviations appear, agency practices move, clauses get reorganized, and all your templates go stale. And those old assumptions stop matching the new language. Your company has work to do too. The government may be overhauling the FAR, but contractors need to overhaul how they track, flow down, train, interpret, document, and control all of your obligations. Because stripped down regulation does not mean stripped down risk. And if your internal policy still says something like see FAR section whatever, but that whatever has been rewritten or simplified or deviated from or surrounded by agency guidance, you may not have a policy anymore. You may have regulatory nostalgia with a revision date. So today, we're not doing a clause-by-clause panic tour. We're doing something much more useful. We're talking about how contracting professionals survive the rule changes without losing their minds. This is WTF, Working Through FAR.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.
Broadcasting from deep inside the Federal Acquisition Labyrinth, this is the GovCon Show. This show is for acquisition pros, wannabe pros, and procurement insiders who need a place to unpack the chaos. We speak fluent contracting and sarcasm. No clearance required. This is the GovCon Show. And away we go!
Welcome back. I'm your host, Tim Magnuson, for this bonus episode of the GovCon Show. Let's jump right in and start with the obvious. The FAR overhaul is not just the government's problem. Oh, it may be their initiative, and it may be the government's regulation with their deviations, their guidance, and their implementation process. But contractors live with the consequences. Every contractor has policies, procedures, templates, subcontract flowdown logic, proposal assumptions, training materials, and checklists that are all built around how the FAR has historically operated. And when that structure changes, even if the intent is really simplification, but when it changes, your internal system has to catch up. If your proposal team is using old assumptions, that's going to matter. If your subcontract is using old flowdown templates, that matters. And if your policy cite language that has been rewritten or moved into guidance, that also matters. Now, here's the one key element everybody must recognize. Simpler text does not automatically mean simpler performance. Sometimes it just means the risk has moved. And just because something has been removed from FAR doesn't mean it's been removed from our reality. Let me say that another way. This is a line that everybody really needs to understand. Removed from the FAR does not automatically mean removed from the acquisition environment. Some content may move into guidance. Some obligations will still come from legal statute. Most will likely show up in agency supplements, and there'll be others that will show up through class deviations. Now, some may survive through the solicitation instructions, contract language, and statement of work requirements, or even agency practices. But that means that contractors cannot manage this just by saying, well, I don't see it where it used to be. That is not analysis. That's hide and seek with regulatory consequences. If the obligation moved from one place to another, your company still needs to know how to find it and how to interpret it and document compliance when it is required. The danger is not just that people miss the new language. The danger is that people keep operating under the old language and assuming that nothing has changed. That's how companies end up with templates that look familiar, sound professional, but quietly betray them. Now, let's spend a minute on the agency deviations, because this is where the acquisition labyrinth starts decorating itself, right? The FAR Council is likely to issue model deviation text, and agencies may adopt that model text through class deviations. Different agencies may move at different times, and contractors working across multiple agencies may have to track different implementation dates, supplements, or instructions, and that affects your internal practices. So if you support DoD, Department of War, DHS, GSA, NASA, DOE, or HHS, or any of the other alphabet soup with procurement authority, you cannot assume one clean switch flipped everywhere at once. That would be far too easy for us. Federal acquisition does not believe in easy. It believes in, please review this deviation, supplement, attachment, or whatever, and related guidance before lunch. And that's why contractors need an updated discipline. Not panic, not LinkedIn lawyering, and certainly not one person screaming, the FAR has changed, during a Teams channel and then disappearing. A discipline is what you need. Who tracks the changes? Who determines if they're relevant? Who updates the templates and informs the procurement and subcontract teams? What about the program? Who trains the people who actually have to use this stuff before they use last year's template and accidentally summon a compliance ghost? That's the work contractors must commit to now. It's also important that we acknowledge that the template debt is real. Every contractor has template debt. Old subcontract templates, old RFP review checklist, old proposal boilerplates with training slides with screenshots from a website that no longer looks anything like that. And somebody always says, well, I remember we updated that recently. Define recently, like 3 years, 5 years? But in GovCon, recently can mean last month, last year, or even during the Obama administration. Template debt becomes dangerous during these rule changes because templates create false confidence. People trust them. They assume the template is current. They assume the clauses are right and the flowdowns have been handled. They believe that the person before them checked it. There it is again, the national anthem of season 2. Somebody probably checked it. No, maybe nobody checked it. Maybe the template has been walking around with outdated assumptions and a clean footer. That is not control. That is formatting with risk. Speaking of flowdowns, subcontract flowdowns deserve their own warning labels because flowdown logic cannot be copy and paste theater, because when the FAR structure changes, flowdown logic has to be reviewed. And I don't mean copied, actually reviewed. A clause may have changed. A requirement may be moved. And an agency supplement may suddenly matter. A prime contract may include language that doesn't flow down automatically, but still creates performance or compliance risk. And if your subcontract team is still operating on, well, we always include these clauses, you may be doing copy and paste theater without knowing it. Flowdowns are not decoration. They are risk allocation. They tell subcontractors what obligations they carry. And flowdowns affect pricing and performance. They affect compliance and certainly affect your future disputes. They determine if the prime is stuck holding the risk that the sub never accepted. So when the FAR gets overhauled, your flowdown process needs its own inspection. Not because everything is broken, but because assuming it is fine is how things become broken politely. And one more thing, I truly mean do not trust the headlines. Let's talk about a modern disease, headline-based compliance. Someone sees a post, the FAR has been streamlined, the FAR has been gutted, the FAR has been simplified, or maybe the FAR is being revolutionized, and suddenly everybody has a legal opinion based on a headline, or maybe a paragraph and a confident LinkedIn comment from a guy whose profile says acquisition thought leader. Do not do that. I encourage you to read the actual source, read the deviation, read the solicitation and every clause it contains. You should also read the agency guidance and the transition language and be aware of the effective dates. After that, then you talk. Because during major regulatory change, bad information travels faster than good information. Panic travels fast of all. Your company does not need to panic. It just needs a method. And this part is not glamorous, but it truly matters. Effective dates matter. Applicability matters. You cannot manage FAR overhaul risk with just a hint of vague awareness. You truly need version control. You need records. Because when someone asks 6 months later why you used that clause, or why you used that template, or why you made an assumption and how you got to the final interpretation that you did, I think that was the current version is not exactly the kind of evidence that makes the room relax. Version control is boring. I get it. But so is denial hygiene. Ignore either one of them long enough, and the consequences will get very expensive. And I'm sure all of you recognize that training cannot be optional when the rules change. Training has to follow, and not just contracts training. The program needs to know what changed. Procurement and subcontracts needs to know what changed. Leadership needs to understand that simplified does not mean stop asking questions. And training cannot just be, hey, here is the new rule, good luck. That is not training. That is no more than abandonment by PDF. Good training encompasses scenarios. What changed and what didn't? Where do you go look? What do we stop doing and what are we required to start doing now? That is useful training. Everything else is just confetti. The message of this whole episode has been your company needs an internal overhaul as well. But what does a contractor overhaul actually look like? Well, it's not panic. It's not rewriting every policy you've got by Friday. It's not sending a 14-page email that begins with, hey team, please be advised. That will guarantee that half the company will never be advised. What you need is a practical and workable overhaul, starting with ownership. Who is responsible for tracking the FAR and all the agency deviation updates? Then, an impactful review. Which policies, templates, checklists, flowdowns, and proposal language and training materials are affected by all of the changes? Then you need to prioritize and implement. Update the tools that people actually use and train the people who actually use them. Communicate the change in very plain, everyday language. And then you document the decision. What changed, why, when, and who approved it. That's how you survive rule change like a professional. Not by pretending you memorized everything, but by building a system that does not require memory to control behavior. And that's exactly where GovCon Advisory Group can help. If your policies and procedures or your proposal checklist or internal practices are still built around the old structure, now's the time to look. You might go to our website and run the policy control diagnostic, because that will help you determine whether or not your policies actually control behavior or if they just exist as documents. And if you need to talk through a specific FAR overhaul issue or an agency deviation, or maybe even a contracting proposal gap, schedule a GovCon risk triage call with us. And you can do that through our website as well. And if your team needs practical training on how to work through the FAR changes without panic, that's exactly the kind of real-world contracting development we support through contractsclassroom.com. Because the FAR may be getting an overhaul, but your company needs more than awareness. You need control. So let's bring this one home. WTF does not mean just what you think of, nor does it mean what the FAR. No, sir, not anymore. Now it means working through FAR. Because that's what contracting professionals do. We work through change, through deviations, and we work through agency guidance. We work through templates that should have been updated 2 revisions ago, but we don't panic. We read, we verify, and update. And then we communicate and train. That's control. And that's what we do. We control. The Revolutionary FAR Overhaul may simplify parts of the regulation, but it doesn't eliminate the need for judgment. It doesn't eliminate the need for policies, nor does it eliminate flowdown analysis. And it definitely does not eliminate the need for someone in the room to say, wait a minute, what version of this truly applies? That person may not be popular, but that person may save the file. So yeah, the FAR got an overhaul, and new training for your team is a must. Okay guys, that's about it for this episode. If you found any of this information useful, we ask that you like, share, and subscribe. And if you have a friend that's dealing with some of this, please send them a copy of this episode. Not in a rude sort of way, but a, hey, look at this kind of way. All right, guys, don't forget, broadcasting from deep within the acquisition labyrinth, this is the GovCon Show. And yeah, this episode was truly cleared for public release, but just barely.
If today's episode sounded a little too familiar, that's probably a sign. Until next time, keep your files tight, your logic tighter. Remember, if your compliance approach is built on checking boxes, you're building risk. We'll see you next time on the GovCon Show.
This broadcast has been cleared for public release, but just barely.